Somebody asked a question in French, of course. I only took 3 years of it. Is there a book, is there a study on the Jewish racial type? Respondez s'il vous plaît. I can't. What I'll do is I'll check into it. There must be. There's the book by Karl Kautsky. That's by International Press. It was published in 1926. Is about the Jewish race that I mentioned. I think it's International Press. It's a very, very old book. Maybe you could find that translated into French. As I said, I agree with his findings, but I don't agree with his general conclusion. It's called by Kautsky, Karl Kautsky, both with K's, Karl Kautsky, 1926. Is there such thing as a Jewish race? And I have the thing in my notes, the exact title, but look for it in translation. Other than that, I've never looked in the French sources because I don't really speak French. I don't speak French at all. But see if you can find that, or I'll check it out somehow. Okay.
Will you answer this question? Is there an important Lenin in her rights for the birth of a child?
Not that I know of. Not that I know of. There isn't an important Lenin in the what they call the Brit Milah, which is the when they're born. I don't know that. All I know is that what's cut is cut, and they give them wine soaked in like gauze, so it could be linen. So, but not to cover him or anything. But I know that he's given wine to keep the baby from crying or getting hysterical after the surgery. And that wine, my own son, he was on a gauze pad, but it could be on linen. But linen is the ritual, the official ritual cloth of the Jewish people, and it is white. It's always white. Among the ultra-Orthodox, I've never seen anything other than white. And the tablecloths as well for the Passover. They are usually white and preferentially linen.
We'll have one more question for Mrs. Jackson. Is there a Jewish morphology, a dominance of dolichocephalic or brachiocephalic?
I would have to check into that. I would have to check into that. Anything else? Anything else? The other one is for the scriptural. Let me, yeah, okay. Okay. The other one's for John. For the other ones.
Have you finished?
Yeah.
Thank you.
But can I take those questions?
The question into the microphone is, we have a question for Mr. Babinet.
Please, Mr. Babinet. Monsieur Babinet.
I'm just checking. Okay, let me get off and get this. Okay. Okay, let me just check into that.
Vous les lisez, et puis répondez.
Non, attendez.
Bon, il y a une question de Léa. Ne serait-ce pas les Grecs qui auraient emprunté à la ville de... ne serait-ce pas les Grecs qui auraient emprunté à la ville de Sindon, de Sidon, le mot de Sindon, ville où, paraît-il, on tisserait de lin. C'est possible, je n'en sais rien, mais de toute façon, le mot hébreu est assez proche puisque c'est Sadine. Et en pluriel, c'est Dinim. Donc on voit tout de même une racine.
There is a root, current root, a recurrent root, sorry. However, I give the definition which is found on the Larousse Universal, the dictionary Larousse, which is probably questionable. However, this dictionary provides an Indian origin, Indo-Indian origin. It is the same root, Sardine and Sandine, so the root is the same. Another question. he challenges the translation given by Mr. Babinet as to some Greek words. I said that esenatopon means in one single place, literally, and I gave also an explanation for it. This expression is used by Savarius, Leon Dufour, which appeared in a book, and I know that the dictionary by Walter Bohr for John 27 says in his place and on himself. The expression in the same place is a way of turning the sentence in French. It identifies an absolute identity. There is no contradiction. However, I would like to relate to Belorantan in official translations, the Jerusalem city, which says in a place, the other one says in another place. This is a contradiction. Unfortunately, the person is speaking off the mic, so we do not know what she said. This means in one single place. In French, you can use in French word à la même place, and the same place, same spot. And Walter Bohr says, in a place by itself. As a matter of fact, John wanted to explain the one place where the head of Christ was placed. This is translation, the explanation. I realize that this can be questioned, but I think that my translation is good. She's still speaking off the mic. We cannot translate what she's saying. This single place or only place means where the head of Christ had rested in one place. The unity is between the two moments, the moment of burial and the moment of the discovery of the grave. That's it. That is the unity of the two moments. There is just one vision of the bandages which were left in one place, in the same place. Here, this is the chin bandage, which remained in the same place in its own place. It is on Jesus' head. It was put there on the head in the grave when Jesus resurrected. The chin bandage remained exactly in the position where it was. This is what John saw. This chin bandage is done in order to avoid the jaw to open. Otonia is a plural. Be careful. It means clothes. But on the basis of the translations and manuscripts A and B, there is synonymy in biblical writings. Probably Luca was inspired by this in order to describe the discovery of the grave or tomb. In all manuscripts we find Otonia. One description of burial he used Sindon. So Otonia is a synonymous of Sindon, which means clothes, but more precisely with this word we identify the shroud. Synoptic. There is a study which was published by Thomas magazine in Toulouse, which I gave my explanations. I think that the stand all of the questions. Otonia is a collective noun, while exenatopon means folding on itself in a way that there can be one place where this is located. But John saw it then, saying in one place, the same place, doesn't say where. John saw clothes around Jesus' head, which were laying in the same place where he had just laying his head. We cannot go on because there are many other questions for Professor Ribet. There will be the possibility of resuming this discussion. Professor Ribet.
Should the Sudarian, or the Sudarian, prayer shawl, which, as Mrs. Jackson indicated, is over the head and over the shoulders according to...
Sopra le spalle, secondo il...
È possibile che il sudarium fosse dispiegato così come detto dalla signora Jackson, cioè che fosse posto sulla testa e che ricadesse anche sulle spalle. Bene, non so se il sudario in altri contesti.
In other frameworks can be considered as this is possible. But what I know is that all of those who want to define precisely the meaning of the words used to indicate tissues and fabrics have certainly to find they meet with various interpretations. The word sindon or shroud, which in synoptics describes the sheet, markers 52 and 53, can perfectly elsewhere refer to something completely different. For example, in Flavius Joseph, we find sindon to designate a veil of the primitive tabernaculus. In 331, it indicates some other elements and fabrics around this. They are not linen. In Antiquity 348, this shroud is a tissue which covers the priest from head to forehead.
So it's a short garment, so the meaning of sind, just like the Sudarian, calls to our common sense. We should never go against common sense. So we must remember to use common sense in analyzing the text, the context, and we should also take into account an interpretation taking into account of philological consideration. For the Sudarium, this is quite easy. There are two places where it is mentioned in the Acts in St. Luke's. So why should we look for an etymology elsewhere? It is in the Old Testament. Well, it is possible that the Sudarium in another context was used for other aims, as a handkerchief, has a shawl on the head. So there are a number of possible meanings, but I'm not through. I would like to go back to what we were saying. The same place, Mr. Babinet mentioned 3 repetitions, but I found is an topon in Joseph and also is then Chorion, Antiquities 6,155, then 3, 123, 129, and each time both Renat and others speak about the same place, and all translations and all reference by Joseph refer to the same place. Babinet Ribet, we are both called to give an answer. When John was writing his gospel, a legend of Akbar was already in existence. If the Sindon had already been transported to Edessa so that only the face was visible, then perhaps the sudarium was applied in order to refer to a sheet which could not be preserved, and perhaps also to refer to the cloth which was kept in Edessa. Perhaps John used the word sudarium in order to indicate the link between the syndon of Jesus and the Edessa's cloth, and not for the reasons quoted by Mr. Babinet. The word sudarium in Latin then created the term suaire in French, starting from the 13th century and not earlier. Sudarium, owing to its etymology, is equal to orarium in Latin. Anyway, it's typically and literally resumed and taken from the Latin word sudarium. Now, Professor Zaninotto should answer a question.
Vous voulez lire en français?
Sì. Allora, la data, mi chiedono di confermare la data del codice.
I'm asked to confirm the date of the Vossianus Code, 10th century. 10th century is then we have a code of the 12th century by John, but it's lacking the first part, then a copy of the Dijon, and then the Parisinus from the 14th century, which is similar to Vossianus. In Rome we have a code of the 12th century where this legend is mentioned, but only the first part, so the most complete is the Parisinus, which exactly copies the Vossianus. The Vossianus is the most perfect. As to the age of the image of Christ coming from Russia, it's 11th century. I'm asked about Reverend Bernard. I'm asked when the image became a funerary cloth, I think in Constantinople, because before nobody had the courage, not even the referendarius, to call it a funeral linen, because something did not correspond with what had been asked. They had asked a face by Jesus, made by Jesus, and they were confronted with a funeral cloth, and it was immediately put aside. It was never mentioned in Constantinople, but then something strange occurred. The image of Christ, the upper part of his body, which I showed you, and the epitaphio, they are beginning exactly at this time. So something was a reference to the funeral cult, and both at the beginning and at the end something is mentioned which is related to the Passion of Christ. The cloth is displayed on Easter Day, so the moment when Christ becomes visible through this image and asks us to see him revive, just as it happened with Thomas. Well, the translation proposed by Father Dubal was proposed by myself also. I was the first to speak about Gregorius Referendarius, so there are two adverbs, here and there. Here water and blood are found, and we are speaking about the face, and then something new, because when the Referendarius is speaking, he hears a murmur, and he said there is something new. He prepares people because they already knew something. And he shows here there is water and blood. So these are just identical. This is identical with the Gospels. I'm asked whether I saw the Rochlitz miniatures. This image dates back to the 13th century. So it's just 1 century and a half that the Sinden is not found in Constantinople. So the artist takes inspiration from ancient narration. Here I would like to mention something interesting. It has been pointed out that the Edessa image has fringes, but fringes are not on the sides, contrary to what is the custom, but they are above, on top and on the bottom. This is very important because the Sinden folded in 4 panzer had fringes which were broken and which had been cut quite surely. So this fringes made people think that it was a drying cloth. The fringes are on the top and on the bottom. They were cut, and what is interesting is that in the 7th century the Sinden is mentioned as a rachos, that is a cloth which is badly cut. This is rachos tetradiplon in the Acts by Thaddeus. So somebody did see it. So this passage in the legend would not have been possible without this interpretation. This image is often represented as a painting on a napkin with fringes, and I already mentioned this, I already explained that. The fringes are caused by the fact that the Sinden was torn on the rims. So many thanks for your questions. They were very interesting. They allowed me to clarify a number of facts.